On this exciting episode, you're more than a wolf, Loring. How is it that a show that's always been premised on murder can surprise you in how squeamish it can get? Thank goodness Arlene Ferris gets away, huh? It's Perry Mason, Season 4, Episode 16, The Case of the Waylaid Wolf. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy. My purpose is pretty simple. Provide an audio companion to every episode of television's greatest legal drama, Perry Mason. Each episode, we give you a summary of the plot. We even compare plots with the Earl Stanley Gardner novel. And this episode was an adaptation. We give you a little trivia, reveal the episode's theme, and revel in a Perry proverb. That's a pearl of wisdom from the man himself. And finally, we head to the water cooler where, just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can discuss the ins and outs of our fave legal cruise adventures. But first, say it with me, to the law library! Each time we visit the law library, we discuss a legal conundrum for Perry's case that helps us set future courtroom precedents. In this trip to the law library, we discuss the privileges a husband and wife have regarding testimony. Friend of the defendant, Madge Elwood, marries her office manager, George Andrews, and when it comes time to have Andrews fess up in court, he invokes the husband-wife testimony clause.
I decline to answer.
You decline? On what grounds?
On the grounds that I cannot be compelled to testify about my wife.
Here's the skinny. They call it spousal privilege, and it falls into two main categories. Spousal testimonial privilege allows a spouse to refuse to testify against the other in a criminal case. In some jurisdictions, the privilege may only be invoked by a witness, not the defendant's spouse. The privilege is often limited to current spouses. Marital communications privilege, on the other hand, protects confidential communications made between spouses during the marriage, even if the marriage ends later. Both spouses have the right to invoke the privilege. The roots of this special privilege, 17th century English common law, grounded in the belief that a husband and wife were considered one legal entity that would make testifying against one's spouse a kind of self-incrimination. In the U.S., the Judiciary Act of 1789 recognized spousal privileges in federal courts. But most recently in 2019, New Mexico abolished the spousal testimonial privilege because it was based, quote, on the legal fiction of spouses being one person. California, when it's been contested, however, has kept spousal privilege around. Now it's time to get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Waylaid Wolf. Arlene Ferris is a hard-working secretary getting by in the secretarial pool with the help of her friend Madge Elwood. The young and attractive Miss Ferris gets asked by the boss's son, Loring Lamont, to work late. She agrees, but when her work is done, her car won't work. Why? We saw Lamont Loring jack it up. Uh-oh. She gets hoodwinked into visiting the family cabin, the sight of which presumes much immorality on Loring Lamont's part. We get a sense this dude has been on the prowl from how he talked to Edith Bristol, his dad's secretary.
Edith, those Newcomb reports, I've arranged for them to be finished up in the secretarial pool.
I said I was perfectly willing to stay and do them.
Yes, I know. But you've been working pretty hard lately. You can take a night off.
Thanks.
Anywho, Lamont gets creepy after he has some drinks. Arlene hightails it, and the music does a better job than the stage decoration of telling us that danger is afoot. After grabbing Lamont's sports car and hightailing it, Arlene comes to Perry. Wise move, with Madge Elwood in tow.
You see, I lost control of the car when I pushed down the accelerator. I've never driven a sports car before.
You didn't stop?
No, I was scared and mad. I drove about 5 miles and stopped at a gas station. I telephoned Madge to ask her to... Maybe I shouldn't bring you into this, Madge.
Why not?
since I was the one made you come to Mr. Mason, she asked me for Loring's address.
Why?
I wanted to leave the car there. I didn't want him to be able to accuse me of having stolen it.
You had the address?
No, I got it from George. That is, George Albert, the office manager. And I called Arlene back at the filling station. Tell him what you did, Arlene.
Well, I parked the car at the apartment building in front of the fire plug.
From Paul Drake, they find out that there's just one problem with getting Lamont to pay for his crime. He's already been murdered.
Excuse me, Perry, but is this the Loring Lamont whose father owns Lamont Engineering Corporation?
Yes. Do you know him?
No, but I know about him. And I'm afraid somebody's already pinned his ears back.
How do you mean?
It just came over the 12 o'clock news. Loring Lamont was found stabbed to death in a beach house near Malibu last night.
Perry goes to work confusing an eyewitness who supposedly saw a woman park Lamont's car in front of a fire plug. Perry gets the man to identify Madge instead of Arlene, and Tragg, he ain't too happy.
Miss Ferris, I'm Lieutenant Tragg of Homicide. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to come down to headquarters with me.
Lieutenant, you're making a mistake. This young woman is not Arlene Ferris.
Next, you'll be saying you're not Perry Mason. Come along, Miss Ferris.
I say that Tragg was fit to be tied when he found he had the wrong woman.
Meanwhile, Perry wants to know who the OK was that Lamont talked to while Arlene was still in the cabin. One candidate, Oolong Kim. We have a Benson Fong sighting.
My name is Oolong Kim. And who are you, sir? My name is Mason. I'm an attorney.
Perry Mason. I've heard of you, sir. What can I do for you?
The other candidate, Orville Kingman, a gambler. It's the I'm okay, you're okay corral over here. Am I wrong? In court, Berger's not around, but his DA implies that Arlene made the whole thing up.
Then it is your contention that the defendant, in order to corroborate her story of a deliberate attempt made by the deceased to lure her to his beach house and to make improper advances, planted evidence near the scene and in her apartment sometime after the murder.
Yes, Your Honor. Indistinguishable footprints and slide marks beside the muddy road near the beach house, and this mud-stained dress in her apartment.
Perry highlights two key facts. The car was tagged twice in front of Lamont's apartment and was absent in between. Ooh la la. And number two, the OK in question was Oolong Kim. He says he saw Papa Lamont's secretary and erstwhile Loring Lamont steady Edith Bristol.
There was a red convertible.
Red convertible? Are you sure of that?
Of course. My wife saw it, too.
Edith confesses.
He was drunk and vicious. He hit me and tried to choke me. I managed to twist away from him, and I picked up the stiletto and struck out with it.
Also, Paul doesn't need anything explained in this one because he's the one explaining things to Della in the denouement.
Only there's one thing I don't understand. Madge's Las Vegas marriage. What was all that?
Well, Madge was afraid that Albert might have killed Lamont. Albert was afraid that she might have. So they were just trying to protect each other.
For the first time this season, we have an adaptation of an Earl Stanley Gardner novel. The novel came out in 1960. The episode came out in 1961. The novel was Earl Stanley Gardner's 100th published book. Let's talk about 5 differences, shall we? Number 1, the whole setup is different in crucial ways. Arlene stays late to work, not on request, mind you, and finds her car won't work, then gets picked up by Lamont. At the cabin, it's Lamont who makes a drink. It's Arlene who makes biscuits. She's particularly proud of them. And it's a phone call that sets Lamont off. There's no hit him with a car moment. The next day, Arlene goes to see Mason, but only then mentions Madge. In the novel, Madge does not work in the Lamont office. She's friends with Lamont, got her pal Arlene a job, and then was involved in a cover-up after the fact, sort of like the TV adaptation. More about that in a sec. Let's just say in the TV episode, there's hints that Madge and Lamont have been together in the past. It's not spelled out. It's all clear in the novel. Loring and Madge are friends, not ex-lovers. Number 2, The novel has no Oolong Kim character. The closest we get is a woman named Sadie who runs the cabin and is in thick with the gambler, also O. Kingman. It's the gambler who the OK refers to, as Orville has blackmailed Lamont for $500 on the night of the murder. Number 3, Perry, much more daring in the novel. He takes photos of Madge. He gets Paul to show those photos to the hi-fi guy before showing up at the hi-fi place for the bait and switch. Perry plants evidence at the scene to draw attention to Madge and confuse the police. He also gets caught with Della going through Madge's garage, similar to something that happens in the television episode. The difference is that in the book, Perry's playing fast and loose with Madge's apartment draws the attention of Hamilton Berger. Up until that point, an assistant DA has been in court. Hamilton appears to hold Perry's feet to the fire. Of course, it's Hamburger who ends up getting burnt. Number 4, the traffic cop who can testify to the luring Lamont car getting ticketed twice. Super crucial in the book. Perry has to go through a gamut of legal hoops to get him in court. But once the cop is there, Perry rips the case wide open. Number 5, rare for the novels, we get a confession in the courtroom from Edith Bristol, but with a difference from the television adaptation. 1, the judge makes her come to the witness stand to make her confession, and 2, the judge says out loud he thinks her confession indicates she'll get off for self-defense if the facts confirm her story. Also fun, Perry says that while Madge and George broke the law in covering up the death, the police basically fumbled away their chance to successfully prosecute them. The two can't testify against each other because of spousal privilege, and the eyewitness testimony from the hi-fi guy has been hopelessly compromised. It's a fun little kicker to the novel. Boom. Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode, I give you 3 trivial takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. Adela is a deep dive on an actor or actress who guest starred in the episode. And a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. Our Paul for this episode involves an odd bit of characterization for our decedent. Here's how Arch Schnooknick Loring Lamont describes himself.
A wolf in clothing made from a British sheep.
Our prompt, okay. What British tailor would be providing clothes for a jet-setting womanizer like Lamont? Is there an obvious candidate? Was it a known reference that young guys on the make would wear British clothes? Let me know what you find, Pauls. Our Della for this episode is Arch Schnooknick Tony Travis, a.k.a. Loring Lamont. 10 facts about Tony. Number 1, Tony Travis was born Travis Richard Cleafield, March 4th, 1926, in New York. Moves to Los Angeles when he was 10, attends Beverly Hills High School, shows a love for music, but pursues acting after graduation via the, wait for it, Pasadena Playhouse. He signs a contract with MGM, but then serves 2.5 years in the Navy during World War II. Number 2, after discharge, gets a role in as the romantic lead in a Cisco Kid flick starring Gilbert Roland, No Great Shakes, so in 1948 he goes into the construction biz with his dad. Number 3, not satisfied with being a desk dude, he turns to singing, and in April 1954 he records a demo, gets his pal Dinah Shore to give it a great eval, and she gets him a record deal. The 28-year-old makes his recording debut on the label via the song It's Easier Said Than Done. Number 4, in November of 1954, he's heralded as the 4th most promising male vocalist on the Billboard Disc Jockey poll.
Now you're in the isolation booth, so you know you gotta tell the truth. Honey, honey, it's the last plateau. Do you love me? 'Cause I just gotta know.
Ahead of him, Pat Boone, Bob Manning, and Nick Noble. Behind him, Sammy Davis Jr., Charles Applewhite, and Steve Lawrence. Charles Applewhite, ladies and gentlemen. Number 5, in April 57, Buddy Bregman signs Tony. And Mr. Travis got himself a role in the 1957 film Jamboree. Other people in that film, Fats Domino, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, Joe Williams, and the Count Basie Band. Number 6, In 1958, Tony returns to acting. He's in Bells Are Ringing at the Los Angeles Fred Miller Theater. He's on shows like M Squad and Perry Mason. Number 7, but his most famous role is 1960's The Beatniks, a crime film, teen-sploitation genre.
I told you to stop riding. Maybe you just like to walk on out of here and you can forget you ever knew us. Isn't that it?
Oh, man, I get your message.
Directed by Paul Frees and skewered by the dudes over at Mystery Science Theater 3000. Number 8, throughout his life, dated Jane Wyman, Joan Tyler, Sheila Connolly, Mona Freeman, Elaine Stewart, Cleo Moore, and Judith Campbell, later becoming notorious, Judith Campbell that is, for being JFK's mistress. Number 9, his wife, Carolyn, was the daughter of a real estate developer, financier, and philanthropist named Mark Taper. They were the maternal grandparents of actress Chiara Aurelia. Number 10, Travis spent his final years in a retirement community in Pasadena. He died in May of 2018 at the age of 92. Our parry for this episode concerns our hero's eating companions. First, there's this reference to noshing with Paul.
I'm afraid our lunch date is off.
Work?
Possibly.
Lunch date with Paul. Fun. Although sads that it got canceled. Then later on, Della serves the boys salad at home. It looks like she's made dinner at Perry's place. Good times. Wouldn't you love to be a dinner guest at that meal? Our theme for this episode is wolves. Loring Lamont, he's one of the worst. Predatory like a wolf? Check. Insulting and assaulting? Check. He's a selfish man-child nursed by a doting father and more cash than he knows what to do with. And at first blush, I'd put him at the top of the list of the most despicable men we've seen on the show, at least in terms of on-screen action. Obviously, there have been tons of men who've committed murder. Top 5 answers on the board. We asked 100 fans, really just me, one fan of Perry Mason, to name the top 5 wolves who've been on the program as of season 4, episode 16. I came up with the following list. See if you can add to it. There's Albert Tidings from the case of the baited hook. Yeesh. Tony Davis from the case of the black-eyed blonde. That guy beats up women. Hugo Werner from the case of the shattered dream. There's Alan Sheridan from the case of the artful dodger. And Donald Fletcher from the case of the envious editor from this season. Note, all of those dudes but Tony Davis are decedents. The moral, don't be a wolf in Perry Land, and don't be a wolf in any land, men. The predator becomes the prey eventually. Now, let's hear a Perry proverb. In an odd turn of events, this episode's Perry proverb comes by Paul, but he's quoting Perry.
So we're just trying to protect each other.
Comedy of errors.
Just errors, Della, no comedy. As Perry would say, murder is never funny.
No Perry in the denouement of this episode, so it's up to Paul to give Della a reply that would match our intrepid hero's ethos. Duly noted, Paul. Although a second later, Della is laughing and calling Paul boss. It's okay to joke when you're calling Paul the boss, right? Just know when to laugh. Now, let's grab a swig from the water cooler.
Now, there is one thing I don't understand.
Go on, Paul.
Each episode in the water cooler, I give you deleted scenes, outtakes from the script that didn't make the episode's final cut. Number 1, we get a date between the wooden George Andrews and jet-setting Madge Elwood. Involves playing a board game with lots of paper calculations. Something tells me George ain't that much fun. Number 2, Perry takes Della into the hi-fi store, and they sampled 2 records, the Jazz, generic jazz joint from the case of the envious editor, and that number from the beginning of the Resolute Reformer. All the greatest hits of Perry are yours on Decca Records. Number 3, Arlene sues Papa Lamont for damages and wins. Arlene won't be grinding it out on the secretarial pole anytime soon. Ta-ta, ladies. Our Paul prompt from last time involved greenbacks. You'll remember that the case of the Fickle Fortune involved $153K worth of Civil War era greenbacks. Paul dropped this dime.
Right at the present time, according to the best authorities, there are still a great number of greenbacks that have never been turned in for redemption. In fact, more than $333 billion worth.
Aunt Myra sent along a 1935 New York Times article that said there were 300 million greenbacks still out there as of the date of that newspaper article. What a terrific find, Aunt Mai. And thanks to Karen, a listener who sent along the Bureau of Engraving and Printing's fact sheet about greenback notes. I noted this, quote, the U.S. note or greenback was at the center of a countrywide debate on monetary policy when the post-Civil War economic boom ended in the Panic and Depression of 1873. Many, especially farmers, put the blame on the Treasury's policy of contracting the currency and removing U.S. notes from circulation in an attempt to go back onto the gold standard, wherein a $1 note could be redeemed for $1 in gold. As a consequence, there was a call for the expansion of U.S. note circulation or inflation of the currency. This belief became joined with a political ideology that opposed big business and banking interests, resulting in the birth of the Greenback Party, end quote. Thanks, Pauls. Now, let's hear a listener letter. Karen wrote in with some Paul info, as well as this, quote, I enjoy your podcast. The structure is great. Your enthusiastic delivery is a cheerful approach that I appreciate, end quote. Thanks so much for listening and participating, Karen. Love it. First email, also a contribution to the Paul prompt. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Do you have a comment on the episode or the pod in general? You can always drop me a line at theperrypod@gmail.com. Next time, a man wants to get a divorce, but a woman won't let him. What? Marital troubles in Perryland? Say it ain't so. You'll want to grab a coat for the case of the wintry wife. Join us, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue, babes!